In this lesson, you'll learn how to play my arrangement of "O Christmas Tree." This is a beautiful beginner-level arrangement. It's just chords and notes, so there are no slides, hammer-ons, or pull-offs. And this arrangement is very suitable for beginning fingerstyle students. Let's get started with a demo, and then we'll move into our tutorial. If you're enjoying this arrangement, please give this video a thumbs up, and if you're new to my channel, then welcome. I'm Lara. I'm a musician, a composer, and a ukulele teacher. I hope you have fun exploring my arrangements and song tutorials. This arrangement is for low G tuning, and the tabs will be on screen during this lesson. You can also download the tabs from my Patreon page, along with my book of tabs and my songbook covering all of the tutorials that I've shared. You'll find a link down below in the description to download the tabs. Now let's get started with our tutorial and walk through the tabs. The first tip for playing this melody is that almost every measure starts with an arpeggio. So an arpeggio is a broken chord played slowly so that each string rings out. For example, in measure 2, we start with an arpeggio on our F chord, and we're playing only through the second string. Throughout this melody, each time we play an arpeggio, the melody note will be on the lowest string. So if we play an arpeggio through all 4 strings, such as at the beginning of measure 3, the first string is going to carry the melody note. But in measure 2, we play the arpeggio through only the second string, and here the second string carries the melody note. So whatever string the melody note is on is the string that we should play the loudest. Almost every measure in this arrangement begins with an arpeggio. There are a few exceptions. For example, in measure 5, we have our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the second string, and we're going to finger pick strings 4, 3, and 2 together. Then we'll do the same on our F chord. So there is no arpeggio in this measure. Measures 9 and 17 also use these same 2 chords. And now for some tips on fingering. In measure 2, we're starting with our standard F chord fingering. We'll play an arpeggio through the second string, and after picking the second string 2 more times, I'm going to place down my pinky on the 3rd fret of the second string. Now here you can use your ring finger if you'd like, but for me, my pinky is more comfortable. As we move into measure 3, we'll maintain our F chord fingering and lift up our pinky. Here we'll play an arpeggio through all 4 strings. In measure measure 4, we're going to a G minor chord, but we're starting with just a partial chord because our melody note is on the 2nd string. So here I have my middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string and my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. We'll play an arpeggio through the 2nd string, then we'll pick the open 1st string, and then we'll place our index finger down on the 1st fret of the 1st string. And now we've formed our complete G minor chord. Now we've already looked at the chords in measure 5, and measures 6 through 9 are played the same way as measures 2 through 5, until we get to the very last note of measure 9. Here we're going to place our pinky down on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Now we have our F chord in place from measure 9, and we're going to keep it in place as we move into the first arpeggio in measure 10, still holding down our pinky on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Then we'll lift up our pinky to play the open 1st string, and then we'll place our pinky on the 5th fret of the 1st string, and then move it back down to the 3rd fret. Keeping our pinky in place, this 3rd fret of the 1st string is going to be the melody note of the arpeggio that starts measure 11. So here we're going to a G minor chord. I'm placing my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string and my middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. Here we'll play an arpeggio through all 4 strings. Then I'm going to place my index finger down on the 1st fret of the 1st string and lift up my pinky. In measure 12, we're going to a C7 chord. So I'm keeping my index finger in place and lifting up my other fingers. Then I'm using my ring finger to play the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, and then my pinky to play the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Now our final note in measure 12 is the 1st fret of the 1st string. There are 2 ways that we can play this note, setting ourselves up for the F chord that begins measure 13. The first way is to use our index finger on the 1st fret of strings 1 and 2. Here we'll play the 1st string, and then we'll place our middle finger down on the 2nd fret of the 4th string to play the arpeggio that begins measure 13. Then we'll simply lift up our index finger off of that 1st string so that we can play the open 1st string. The other fingering option, moving from measure 12 to measure 13, which I prefer, is to use my middle finger on the 1st fret of the 1st string at the end of measure 12. Then I place my index finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string and my ring finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string for the arpeggio that begins measure 13. Then I lift up my middle finger to open up the 1st string. So you can use either of these fingerings, whichever is more comfortable to you. Measure 14 is played the same way as measure 2. In measure 15, we're playing an arpeggio through all 4 strings on our F chord. Then we'll play the open 1st string, and then we move to a D chord. So I'm keeping my middle finger in place and then placing down my ring finger and pinky on the 2nd fret of strings 3 and 2. Then I'm picking the open 1st string to end measure 15. Measures 16 and 17 are played the same way as measures 4 and 5. When we get to the end of measure 17, then we'll go back to measure 1 and repeat these 3 lines. Now the second time we get to measures 16 and 17, approaching the end of the melody, we can start slowing down the tempo. If you're feeling generous as we're moving into the holiday season and you'd like to support my channel, then see the video description for an easy way to buy me a coffee. I hope you've enjoyed learning my arrangement of O Christmas Tree. Happy holidays and thanks for watching.